Maybe don't know.
This time, this time to build. 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 This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I am your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 98 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I am currently sitting in my friend Brendan Leonard's house in Denver, Colorado. I'm here for the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show, and I won't bore you with the details, but something interesting did happen to me today. I was walking into the show and I went to registration, and an older woman, probably in her late 50s, was checking me in, and she noticed that my badge was for working media. And she said, "Oh, media, what kind of media?" And I said, "Well, I do a blog and a podcast." And she said, "Well, maybe you're the person I should tell." And I'm like, okay, what? And she said, "I was looking in the magazine that they gave us out front this morning when I was walking in, and I saw that there's only one or two Asian people and one or two black people. And I think there should be more, and there should be people with disabilities, and there should be lesbians and gay people." And I was like, yeah, funny you say that. I'm putting out a podcast tomorrow that talks a little bit about diversity. And I just thought it was interesting that she decided to tell me, a white guy, of all people. And it was just a fun conversation. And actually, that's sort of been the theme of the week. I was up at the Crag just recently, and an older black gentleman came walking up the trail, and one of the first things he said to me when he saw that I was getting ready to climb, he's like, "You ever seen a black person do this?" And I'm like, well, yeah, actually, I have. Not that many, but you know, we're trying to make it more inclusive, and really, that's what this conversation is about. And I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna bore you with the details up front, though I do have quite a bit to say on the back end. It's pretty tough to get my thoughts together around this whole subject. I mean, some of them are very, very clear. Others have been a little slower to come. So if you're interested, please stick around at the end of this episode, because I'd love to start a conversation around, you know, how I'm trying to understand this and how I'm trying to think about it as a white male. And today's conversation is with three of the women who are leaders in Brown Girls Climb. And I sat down with Bethany, Montserrat, and Seisha at the International Climbers Festival in Lander, Wyoming. And Bethany actually reached out to me during a very respectful conversation on my Instagram, in which there were a lot of great points made about had I interviewed any people of color, and where were those interviews, and where were those conversations. And Bethany reached out and said, if you ever want connections, we would be happy to help you out, to help you find people to talk to. And Bethany was coming to Lander for the festival, so we decided to sit down in City Park during the trade fair, the four of us in the grass, and have a tough but really, really fun and really great conversation, in which I appreciate them letting me struggle through the best I could.
Maybe don't know.
And to have women who look like you teach you, it's just so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, this is about climbing, but it is about so much more than climbing.
This time to build power. This time to build power. This time
alguien más te nadará. Como la flor.
I don't know what she
Con
says there.
tanto amor, me diste tú. Se marchitó, me marchó y yo sé perder. Pero, ay, cómo me duele. Ay, cómo me duele. Du, 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 du.
I need this at the beginning of every podcast. Gosh, this is amazing.
I've been doing a lot of singing and karaoke, so my throat is a little
Were you doing karaoke here? Was there karaoke
in the car.
here? Ah,
We have
I
a
see.
portable karaoke microphone with a built-in speaker and like flashing lights and special effects. It's pretty cool.
In the car.
Portable. So
Yeah.
we were doing it in the car because we had 6 hours to kill.
It's a pretty standard tradition that the Brothers of Climbing started, that they do karaoke in New York with their crew. Now we're starting to do it with our crew, do it at the Color of the Crag.
Outdoor retailer shows.
Yeah, just wherever we can. I mean, you know, just it feels good.
Oh man, this sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, first off, thanks for sitting down and talking to me. You know, I come from a diverse area of, you know, the country. There, Cincinnati, the school I went to was pretty diverse, but there's not a ton of it in climbing. Especially here, now that I live in Wyoming, it's not diverse at all. And seeing the diversity of the festival this year is really exciting for me. And I'm really glad that you guys are willing to sit down and have this conversation and educate me and everyone else who's listening, because I really want to understand how to be better at promoting diversity, and just making sure that people are comfortable, including myself and everyone else who wants to be an ally or wants to just help promote diversity. First, can you introduce yourselves so that we all know whose voice belongs to who, and just kind of how you came to Brown Girls Climb?
Yeah, I can start. So my name is Bethany Lebowitz. I'm the founder of Brown Girls Climb, and you know, it basically started in Maryland. I went out to the New River Gorge and kind of realized, like, oh, I'm the only brown person here, but our gyms are super diverse out there. And what would this crag look like if more people were out here that kind of looked like me, or maybe looked different than me, but had, you know, it was a little bit more heterogeneous, I guess. So I was encouraged to start the Instagram, and, you know, out of that, I got to find all of these wonderful, strong, beautiful ladies that were climbing all around the world, and we've been able to connect and grow together. So.
I'm Seisha McGee. I am one of the leaders of Brown Girls Climb in the Colorado area. I live in Denver, and I have been climbing for about 3 years and had not tapped into an organization that promoted anything around diversity in climbing. So I mostly climbed with white guys, which is kind of interesting. The dynamic is very different. So I actually met Montserrat and started to follow Brown Girls Climb on Instagram, and got plugged in that way, and completely changed my view of the climbing community, and has also changed where I want to go as a climber as well, because I feel like I now have a community that understands me and understands what I need at a crag, and that's just been really wonderful.
Cool.
Awesome. My name is Montserrat, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a leader with Brown Girls Climb. I am based out of Boulder, Colorado now, just as of last week. And I got involved with Brown Girls Climb when I was working in Estes Park. I work as an outdoor educator, and I've been working in the outdoors for maybe going on 6 years. I don't know. Can't do math. Like 5-6 years since I was in college, and I was really turned off by the climbing community when I was in college and didn't feel welcoming. And then I moved to Colorado and I found really awesome community, and there I just started to feel really inspired to do more work in the community and to pursue my own adventures. And a lot of it has actually been centered around being able to facilitate experiences for other women and girls in the outdoors. And I do that both through my volunteer work and my part-time job. So
Cool. Bethany, can you tell me a little bit about how Brown Girls Climb started, and kind of if you all want to jump in and just tell me what the mission is and what you guys do.
Yeah, so I'll start with the mission. So our main goal is to promote and increase visibility of women of color in rock climbing. So we do that through a lot of different means. One is really by elevating women who are already in rock climbing. There is a lot of women of color, a lot of people of color that have been in climbing for a while. And so just trying to create opportunities to elevate those voices and share those stories, because unfortunately I don't think, those stories just haven't been shared within the traditional climbing community. So we're really trying to take that challenge on for ourselves. Another way is through meetups, like kind of Stacia was mentioning. We have meetups all over the country, and those are expanding as leaders pop up. And those are really for, climbers that have been climbing for a while and people that just want to have a really comfortable space to experience climbing. They may never come back. They may come back. We hope they do. But it's a space that we hope that people feel that they can kind of relax into themselves. If they want to talk about the day or what's going on in the news, they can do that. And they're really skill focused. So we really try to hone in on what do you want to accomplish today. Maybe that's just getting up your top rope, or maybe that's learning how to place pro. So we try to facilitate that through kind of looking at all the skills that are present in that group for the day and going off that. And then lastly is just creating more opportunities for other marginalized groups to experience climbing in general. So one of those ways is through Color the Crag Climbing Festival, which we can kind of talk about later. Mm-hmm. So a little bit on that is that Mikhail and I from Brothers of Climbing connected right away after I started the Instagram. And since I had never really had a community to plug into, that was the first goal, is let's just meet up. I want to go to the crag with the crew. They've had this going on for a while and they were able to have outdoor stuff, but I've never experienced, what it's like being with a brown crew outside. What does that feel like? So we organized the climbing festival first, and so we were doing that throughout 2017, and then in March of 2017, I think, we had our first meetup in Maryland, and then shortly after, Montserrat kind of took initiative and started the meetups. Her and Chela Orlando Garcia started meeting up in Denver. So, yep.
Yeah, I see. I've followed your Instagram for a while, and I spend a lot of time solo in the gym and training by myself, and then I see the photos of your meetups, and everyone looks like they're having the absolute time of their life, and I'm so jealous every time. I'm like, man, I need a crew like this to climb with. Everybody's having so much fun, and I'm just in here banging my head against the wall. So I think it's really cool, and I think it's interesting that, and I hadn't thought of this, that you don't necessarily have the experience of climbing with a brown crew when you just start climbing on your own, and because there's just not much of it, or it's not easy to find, I guess.
Yeah, climbing in general, and that's something we just have to recognize, and space requires a lot of privilege, whether that's time or resources to get equipment or to buy a gym pass or to have a car, transportation to go to the crag, or, the social capital to know who to ask to show you the way, I mean, there's so many issues that kind of tie into like getting into the space. So,
or even if you don't know who to ask, everyone in the space looks like you, so you feel really comfortable asking.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. You guys hosted a clinic yesterday, 2 days ago. Or was that yesterday?
Yesterday.
All the days blur
like
together
ages
at
ago.
these festivals.
I woke up this morning and I was like, it's Sunday. And they're like, no, it's Saturday. And
Yeah,
I
I've
was
been
like,
doing that
"Oh,
all week.
Cool, okay.
Yeah, crazy. And Grace yesterday said that it was one of the most beautiful things she's experienced. Tell me about the clinic, how'd it go, and what'd you guys climb on, and where was it?
So we actually had a mixed group, men and women, in this clinic yesterday. We were teaching them how to lead outdoors. So we did a mock lead clinic. And I think what was really beautiful about it was everyone was extremely receptive to everything that we were teaching them. They were just really eager to learn. We taught them all of the basics of leading outside. How to clip, how to use a quick draw, how it should be placed on a wall, different belay devices, falling, back clipping, Z clipping. So we taught them all of these things, and then allowed them to, at their own pace, when they felt comfortable, to attempt to lead, and not lead exactly, but they were mock leading. So just pulling up 2 ropes.
Right.
And I think truly the beauty of it was just the space that was created. I feel like everyone felt really comfortable being themselves. Lots of really authentic conversation happened at the crag as they were learning. People felt comfortable talking about their fears, but also their successes. So just a really, really beautiful space.
Yeah, I work in the outdoors, and a lot of the things that end up happening is that as women of color working in the outdoor industry, I mean, I think this is just like across the board, right? In this world, when you look at like pay disparities and like leadership percentage, which like you got to look at some,
Yep.
but working as a woman of color in the outdoors, you in a way have to be twice as good to be recognized, to be as equal as your counterparts. When I started working in the outdoors, like people would, like when I first started, it was like weird. Like I didn't really know how to explain what it felt like when my participants would constantly go to my white male counterparts and ask them questions,
Right.
ask them for directions, ask them for anything. And me just kind of being like, oh, like I need to overcompensate. Like I need to show that I really know what I'm doing. And so that's what it has to be in the outdoors in a way. And it doesn't feel good. Like it doesn't feel like that's where it needs to be. But that's what it kind of has to be in order for you to be recognized as being equal to your white male counterparts. And even not just white male counterparts, but like anybody. Like I work at an organization that serves women and young girls part-time. And I work with I'm the only woman of color on staff there at the moment. And I work a lot with other white women as my co-instructors, or even as my assistant instructors, and me being the lead instructor. And public, like other climbers, participants will constantly go to people, my other co-instructors, and ask them for questions. Just assume I don't know, assume that I'm a participant, different
Right.
things like that. And that's just something that that's what it's always been like for me, working in the outdoors. And this clinic yesterday, it was not like that at all. Like everyone was asking each other questions, like people were asking instructors, and it felt really validating to have people listen to you and not question if you knew what you were doing, or if you
Right.
even knew how to climb. If you like, it's like that's like a thing we always get, we go to the gym and it's like, oh, are you a first time climber, even though you've been to that gym for like a month? And you're like, no, like you just saw me 2 days ago. and they're like, oh, do you need to do a belay test, or do you need to do a belay clinic or something? And you're like, no, I'm checked off to lead belay. And it's like just like having to constantly explain your existence in these spaces.
Yeah, and I just experienced that for the first time, and it made me really uncomfortable. I won't name any names, but I had a friend in town making a film with a big company. They were going to use my gym, and the guys running the show called me and asked me the same questions they had already asked her.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what is going on here? Why, she's totally qualified to answer these questions. Why ask me?
We had one of our leaders who is working with a company whose name I will not name because they're doing dope things. She's doing a biking and climbing trip, and they sent her a photographer. And the first question the photographer asked her is if she had ever climbed trad, and she was like, this entire expedition is a trad expedition, like trad climbing expedition.
Right.
She was like, and we pitched this to you all. And then she called them back and she's like, I can't, like, no, like, I'm not going to work with this dude. And it's like constantly being asked, like, do you know what you're doing?
And I think if we're all to be honest, I feel like if an entire community is constantly questioning whether you are capable of doing the things that you've been doing for years, you start to question yourself as well. And I think that's a huge problem, because people who are constantly questioned also start to look like maybe they don't know what they're doing, because if everyone is questioning whether I know how to lead climb,
Yeah.
It gets in your head.
can I lead climb?
Yeah, you lose the confidence and become a little timid, and that's not a good place to be at all.
Yeah, especially if you're already battling that. I will say to this point, for our festival, there's probably I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but a good majority of our climbers were new climbers, but the other largest group was climbers who have been climbing for 5 to 10 years. So, that was surprising for me also, but hopefully that information gets translated back to the climbing community, that, just because you see someone that looks different from you doesn't mean that they're a new climber. I mean, you can obviously look all over the world and see that, but especially here in the States, because we have such a, such a history too. And also just to have the space here at the festival to have people of color in leadership position, like having more of that. I go to these festivals, I go to these climbing events. We've all been to these type of events, and I don't ever see any people of color in leadership positions. And, I think a big part of that is just getting connected. We want to talk to our own friends and only invite our friends, but we have to go beyond that. If we're going to address this problem, we have to get educated and extend our hand to other places. And those people are very skilled, very capable, and it allows for a really special space where these new climbers were able to be in a clinic that I don't know if there's ever been a clinic with 4 women of color, instructors. That's pretty epic, actually. I'd like to know whether or not that's ever been. No, it's pretty awesome. And I'm not an outdoor instructor yet, but Montserrat and Grace are, and to be able to see them in action at a climbing festival where they really deserve to be at, teaching was awesome.
In Wyoming, nonetheless.
Yeah.
Maybe the most Republican state left in the country.
Yeah, I mean.
I don't know. Where's Florida, North Carolina, South
Oh,
Carolina?
yeah. Good point.
Have you been to the South?
Good point.
I grew up
Yeah.
in North Carolina. We both grew up in the
Georgia.
South.
Yeah, well, and Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the jury's out on whether or not that's the
I
South, but
don't
think it's
consider
the South.
Texas to be in the South.
There's
And it's point of tension.
Yeah, it is
Both
a
of
point of
us.
tension.
What about Kentucky?
Oh,
Where do
no.
they fall?
Oh, Nope, I knew you were gonna bring
We were
it
gonna
up.
go that. Her partner's
just-
from Kentucky, and we
I was
also
just
had
curious.
a
He
call.
knows.
I don't have a horse in the race.
We'll talk about mac and cheese later.
And also
question for
collard
you.
greens.
Okay.
Question for you.
Okay.
Okay, mac and cheese. Is it a main dish or a side dish?
In the South, it's a main dish for sure.
That's not true.
No.
Really?
Okay, you're avoiding the answer.
Okay,
What
for
is it
me,
for you?
for me, it's a side dish, and I don't even like mac and cheese, except for, I have a friend named Jarvis who makes the best mac and cheese on the planet, and I'm all for that. But that's the only mac and cheese I'll eat. So
Yeah.
for me, it's a side dish.
What is the verdict?
Hey, unpack it, Seisha.
Seisha,
I've
back to
never
you.
heard of this like duel before. It was really funny though.
So it's interesting. I read this book, and I read this book recently, and it was a black woman that was dating a white guy, and she was coming to terms with her identity and her identity as a person dating a white man, and towards the end of the book, as she's like accepting that, she asked him, she was like, hold on. Mac and cheese,
Our
is it a main
relationship
dish?
hinges on this.
Exactly. Mac and cheese, is it a main dish or a side? And he was like, main dish. She says, no, it's a side for sure. Though I think it's more of a side in the South. I think maybe in other areas it's probably more of a main dish. When I moved to Denver,
Yeah.
truly everyone put bacon in a massive amount of mac and cheese, and that
Yeah.
was the
It's
meal.
like a main dish, but like twice the price and less options.
Yeah, yes. Or lobster mac and cheese is a famous one in Denver.
I can't go there for
Yeah.
sure. No way.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'd be in a food coma for sure.
I love that mac and cheese is what determines whether a relationship's going to work or not.
Oh, you want another question? Because I've got
Sure.
one for me.
I'm in for
Okay,
questions.
tortillas, corn or flour?
Tortillas, corn.
Okay, good job. We can be friends.
Good job.
Yeah,
Good
we
job.
we just had flour tortillas at my house the other night, and I threw a fit.
So, like, it's like a thing. Like, when my partner and I started dating, like, we went out. He's also a white dude, and I was like, so, like, the waiter asked him, like, oh, do you want corn tortillas or flour tortillas? And he was like, oh, I'll take corn. And I was like,
Te amo.
oh my God. I was like, did you just say corn tortillas?
But then he wanted lettuce and tomatoes and
No,
ground beef,
okay.
and,
No,
and
no.
it was trouble.
He doesn't. He has standards for his Mexican food.
Good.
It's really
You should.
awesome.
Yeah, you really should.
I've taught
You
him
should.
well.
No shredded lettuce and tomatoes on your tacos.
No,
That's
or
not a
cheese,
thing.
or sour
no cheese,
cream.
No cheese.
Ugh,
No.
I just can't.
Oh my goodness.
I walk
Onion,
away.
cilantro.
Yes,
Limon.
that's it.
Those are
Salsa.
appropriate toppings.
I should probably be thrown away listening to this.
I've gone down on some Tex-Mex. I won't lie, but that's like it's another category. You have to respect that it's a totally
It's a different category for sure.
So when you all are out climbing most of the time, are most of your partners other brown people, or are you climbing with white people often as well? Just out of curiosity.
I think it's kind of a mix, honestly. Like, you know, what's been cool about Brown Girls Climb is that we are able to really organize women all over the country and find a crew, but that's still happening. So, you know, it could be really small. And our meetups are once a month because we still have jobs. We still, you know, nobody's a
Right.
full-time climber.
Right.
Unless you are.
Yeah, I mean, no,
I'm
I'm
not.
just thinking about people we meet up with.
Oh, yeah,
I think
yeah.
everyone has jobs, so you know, organizing schedules can be really challenging. So, oh, sorry, yeah, I'm doing like Justin. So yeah, when we can meet up, we certainly do. But we climb with a lot of different partners. You know, we're pretty psyched to get climbing and to hone our skills. I think more importantly, like we want to learn more about safety and rescue. We want to learn more about trad. We want to learn more about leading, like wherever you're at. People are excited. So any chance we can get. But that intermediate space of like really honing in on your skills and having the opportunity to get that mileage in can be really challenging. And that's one of the reasons I loved like the type of clinic that we had, because like getting that mock leading experience is actually kind of challenging. You need 3 people. What if you only have 2? What if you're only just that one? One of the men that were joining us yesterday was like, you know, I go in the Gemini Boulder, which is how I started, and he wants to he has got some pretty big goals, but he needs partners to do that. And you know, so I mean, it's a problem for everybody. I think it's even a larger problem if you're a woman of color, because you've got a lot of different power dynamics going into climbing with other people, that especially climbing with males, white males. So I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely a mix. So for work, the organization mostly serves white women, and so I climb a lot with white women. All of my co-instructors are white women, and then in my personal time, I have like a couple of friends who I feel like pretty safe and secure going with, who are dudes. And normally though, like I default to climbing with these ladies. Like to me, that's just like my safe space. Like if I want to go climb something hard, then I'm gonna go climb with them because I know that I'll be supported, and just like it's a different feel for me for sure. Like it's a different mental game for me when I'm like with my crew than when like I'm with people who I'm like, oh yeah, like you want to belay, like I'll go belay you. Don't really feel that stoked to go climb something hard right now. But I think definitely for me, you know, like it's a lot about having those conversations before I get to the crag around like, you know, one big thing for me is like climbers use the word beaner a lot. And it's a really derogatory word towards Mexican people.
Right.
And so I am the person who has those conversations with my co-instructors. I'm like, when we're teaching our students, we're not going to use the word beaner. Like we're going to use the word carabiner. And then having that dialogue around like why. And even with my personal climbing partners, I'm just like, we're not going to use it. And if it's someone who can't understand that, then I'm like, cool, like we aren't going to climb together, because if you can't respect a simple request, like are you really going to have my back if something happens at the crag, which things have happened at the crag for me, and I want to feel like I have people there who are going to support me.
Yeah, that's honestly something it's never even occurred to me. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, it's pissed off a lot of climbers.
Well, and it's funny because like I think when I was first learning to trad, I was with a friend, you know, he's friend POC, but he used the word beaner, and I was like, I was still getting used to the climbing community. I've been called a beaner a lot in my life, and like it totally took me by surprise. And then it took me a while to figure out what he was talking about.
Right.
But that was really hella distracting, and like she brought that up in an article that she wrote, Montserrat did, and I was like, oh, yes, like actually, like it is. I mean, it's for us, it is a really derogatory term, and it's a really simple change in language that can do a lot to like help refocus a climber. Like if you leave it out of your language, then I can I don't have to think about like, oh, okay.
Did this person just call me a beaner? Is it
yeah. I mean, no, they didn't, you know.
Yeah, they didn't.
They're using it for their own purpose, and I get that, but like, you know, it takes some practice to like change your language, and no one expects you to like know all these things right away, but like, you know, we're telling you now. So like, you know, just practice it. It takes a while, but it's not that much extra work.
And
I just add one more thing?
Yeah, do.
Is that for anyone who's listening to this and is like, well, I don't say it in that context, it doesn't matter.
Right.
People who grew up listening to that word and it's triggering, it's hard. Like there are certain words that like I hear and I'm just like, I'm taken back to like being an 8-year-old little brown girl in the South, and like being like called names and being told like I don't belong there, and being told to go back to my country. And it's like, if people could just humanize those experiences, then I think that they would understand that a little bit better and not make it about their ego and their experiences. Because people were really pissed about this article. A lot of climbers were just so insulted that I was insinuating that they were being racist. And I was like, you're not being racist if you aren't doing this intentionally. We're just asking you to change your word usage. And if you continue to use it, regardless of that history and regardless of that understanding, then
yeah. And you know, frankly, as a coach, as someone whose job it is to help people improve their climbing, using a word that makes your partner uncomfortable, no matter what it is going to impact their performance.
Yep.
You know, period.
Definitely.
And
I appreciate you saying that, because like a lot of people don't think about it like that.
yeah, and that's our job as a partner, is to help your partner do the best that they can do and to be comfortable up there. And if you're using words that they find offensive or make them uncomfortable, then you're just not being a good partner, period. I mean, it doesn't matter what your intention is.
Yeah, and I think I just want to like challenge people to think about these, but also really step inside yourself and see, okay, like, you know, who's your family, who's your friends, like, if you were climbing with someone and they use language that was offensive to someone in your family or yourself, like whether you have like a mental or physical disability, or if you have, if you come from a certain background, or if you have certain preferences, you probably want to say something and speak up and say, oh, okay, like this is actually what you're saying doesn't really help me. It doesn't encourage me. So, can we talk about it? Can we unpack it a little bit more? So like what we're asking it is what I would expect anybody, any partner to bring up to me also,
Yep.
you know? So.
Yeah, we talk a lot about, on the podcast, we talk a lot about having conversations with your belayer, with your partner, before you try something hard, before you get on the wall. My wife and I have battled with this over the years because when she climbs, she can read every little bit of anxiety in my voice when I'm belaying, and that doesn't help her at all. So I've had to completely change the way that I coach, so to speak, and I'm just using coach as encourage her while she's climbing, to help her out. And I encourage every partner to do that. So using words that are derogatory isn't helping anybody, whether you find them derogatory or not.
Yeah, I typically ask myself, like, okay, do the words and the language I'm using, does it encourage, discourage, or distract? And, you know, if it's distract and discourage, like, why am I using them? We're psyched to be here. We're a positive group. Like, I love the climbing community because we are positive. But if we get on this defensive mode, we get, you know, our feelings hurt. We really have to look past that and think about, like, how can we make this community the best community it could be? And there's so much potential there already. Like, the tools are already with us. It's just applying it to our relationships with other people. Not only that we're around and we choose to be around, but also people that we come into contact with in the non-climbing world and in new spaces. So.
Yeah, and you know, I think you and I talked at the bar the other night. Basically yelled at each other over the music at the bar the other night. And I said something that I'm not sure I communicated very well. I'm not sure I'm going to communicate it very well right now. But when all of these conversations first started, and there are some voices out there who make really great points and they make them loudly, and that can put a lot of people off. Which is fine. I think we should be made uncomfortable about some of these things. But my first reaction was to defend climbing. I mean, that's how I felt in my reaction. As if climbing is some community that's up above every other community, you know, because it just happens to be the one I'm involved in. But in reality, we want it to be that great community. So these are conversations that are really, really important. You know, and I think we have to look past the initial gut reaction of trying to defend this thing that we're a part of, and really just work to try to make it a better community.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's not impenetrable to like the rest of the ills of society. Like, we have a huge organization of people, and that's just what's going to come out of it. Oh, sorry. That's weird. Sorry. It's like, oh, okay, good.
Stop talking. Jeez.
Yeah, that's it. This is just reality. You know, I hope people can get past that anxiety that they feel about this ownership of pride, and that there's no faults in the climbing community. There is, and like, it is our responsibility as climbers, because that's what we do on the crag, is like call you out if you don't know something, or if you are saying you do and then I see you, you know, doing some shady stuff. Like, I'm going to call you out because I don't want to put myself at risk, and I don't want to put other people at risk. So that's what we're doing right now. It's really no difference, and we want to continue to improve this space for other people as they enter it too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that because the climbing community has been so white male dominated for years, as it's opening up to include other folks, I think there is an expectation or an assumption that the the community is going to remain exactly the same, and everyone that joins the community or that starts to be seen within the community are going to be exactly like all of the white
They should
males.
just assimilate.
Exactly, like,
Yeah.
and that's really unfair, and it's also coming from a place of high privilege, and I think that as people who are striving to be good people and who are also striving to be accepting of others, I think it's really important for folks to realize that single like white male identity is not the only one that exists in this space, and it's important to embrace, or at least to recognize and understand that other identities don't feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, and the other identities aren't exactly endangering you either. I think that's an important thing to remember, and I think a lot of people take that stance, right? Right.
We've always done it this way.
I think what's cool, I mean, this is a great example. It's like the climbing festival that we had, Color the Crag, was like organized by people who haven't been organizing climbing festivals for years or generations, depending on your family, I guess. And what we saw were like all these great ideas. Like we had like a shuttle bus come from Atlanta to HP40. We were able to make it affordable, super accessible, and low impact. That's just like one of the many examples of like what made that festival great. You should come if you want to check it out. But
yeah, we'll put some info in the show
for
notes.
sure. But part of that is because you have this diversity and like so much more beyond like color. It's like cognitive diversity. We have different backgrounds. Maybe we're engineers. Maybe we're artists. Maybe we're teachers or educators. Maybe we come from the South or the North or wherever. We have these different family cultural experiences, and so we bring all of that knowledge into the space and into the area of the climbing community that we want to invest in or contribute to. And I'm really excited about that because I think, we see the outdoor industry growing every day, and I am very curious to see what types of products come out of it, how we explore the world differently, simply because there's more people that are coming into this space. So I don't think that story, that kind of narrative or that perspective gets shared enough, but we are climbers, we're explorers, we want to do things different, we want to find a different route than what was climbed before. And I think the more people that we have from different experiences, like the richer that can be, and like I'm just really excited about that. So
Totally.
I wanted to speak a little bit of going back to what you talked about, like like people's like initial kind of like that gut reaction.
Yeah.
So I facilitate DEI conversations in different spaces. And one of our community like talking norms when we're going into these conversations is like sitting with our discomfort, right? And recognizing like, why am I uncomfortable right now? Is it because A, I've contributed to this, B, like I've experienced this, C, a little bit of both, or D, like this is just shocking me right now. And obviously like it can be such an other array of emotions. And there is this term that was coined by, hold on, I always butcher her name, because Robin DiAngelo. And she has a book that's called Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. And she coined this term called white fragility. And I think that fragility can be used across the board when having various conversations, not just about race. And fragility comes from the state of an array of emotions, whether it is that you are shocked or you're defensive or you're upset, you just are like shocked. Your whole body is just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, right? It's like this fragile state where like your world is shattered. To have people in the climbing community share stories of sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, it's shocking to you because you're like, this is my community, like I am part of this, like, right. And then you have to take, you in a way have to start questioning yourself, like, have I contributed to this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's shocking, and it's just like, it shatters your world. And I think going back to the term fragility, right? Like you have this moment where you're like, you become so fragile in that state that you either become really defensive or you become like really anxious, you become really upset. And being able to recognize when you're in that state and the ways that you act from that state, right? And how, if you are like, are you calling people like names? Are you calling women bitches, or like because they're talking about sexism and telling them to stop complaining about everything?
Are you telling men to take off their purse when they are climbing because they are afraid to get to the next bolt?
Right. It's just like things like that. Like what are you doing when you're in that state, and really sitting with that and exploring it? I think that book is really great, and she does a lot of talks around the country. And she really coaches people on how, she focuses on the white community, on how you have conversations around racism. But I do think that the term fragility can be used across the board when we're having so many other conversations, because it's a state of just like having your whole world shattered in a way because you just had never really heard it before. And, you know, I experienced it a lot working in the outdoors. Not just in climbing, but like in the outdoors in general, when I'm talking about things that have happened to me or the kids that I work with, and people are just like, that's not true. Like, I can't believe that's happened. And I'm like, it has. Like, who are you to tell me that this has not been my experience?
But I'm a woman and it's never happened to me.
Exactly.
Right. I actually got a lot of that response from my conversation on the podcast with Shelma. Nearly all of the negative feedback I got were from other women saying, this isn't true, this doesn't happen, this isn't a thing. And it really made me realize that there is this division, you know, that I wasn't even aware of. And Montserrat, I think you're right that I definitely questioned myself in those ways. Like, am I contributing to this somehow? And I've looked back at a lot of the music that I put out years ago, and there are a lot of words in that music that I would never use now, you know, that I'm growing. And I think that's another important piece of this, that we have to realize that there may have been things in our past that we did, things that we thought, beliefs that we had that don't hold up to our standards now. And that's okay. It's okay to grow. I think that's what we do as
humans,
people.
we grow.
I mean, I'll pop in and say, like, you know, I'm a person of color. I'm biracial, half Mexican, half white. I grew up in a lower income area and definitely had my slew of terms thrown at me. But I also grew up in the South, and I learned a lot of phrases, a lot of like dichos, a lot of sayings, Southern sayings. And I was confronted a few years ago because one of these terms, like one of these sayings that I used, was offensive towards another, towards a black woman that was a friend of mine, and she brought it up to me, and it was really hard for me to take, because I was like, oh man, like what? Like, we just grew up, you know, I heard all sorts of people use this term or use this phrase, and so it's hard to receive criticism. But that was probably the most like transformative moment for me to understand like how I can just like these simple changes in the way that I talk and the way that I interact people can stop discouraging people and start like promoting growth for them, or being able to
interrupting the norm.
Yeah, exactly. And now I can go back and be like, hey, actually, like, you may have not known this like phrase was hurtful, but it is, and like, let's talk about it together. Let's try to find something else that we can use. So, I mean, this is not, I mean, there is a lot of burden on the white community to change. There's a lot of work to be done to like educate and learn and grow. But this is something that we're doing all the time, because we have our identities, but we don't necessarily always understand or relate to other people. So we have to learn to be sensitive to those and try to figure out ways to really be an ally to other people too.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like I'm constantly learning the ways that ableism has shaped our view of the world, and breaking down my beliefs about the norms in that space as well. So I feel like
Definitely.
in a lot of things that we do. I mean, we're all constantly being challenged to realize that we are not always the norm, that there are others that exist in this space and that have the right to be in this space, and that we should recognize and respect.
Yeah, I think unfortunately, like, race and color gets so, like, there's so much tension around it that people get, man, it's a sore spot, and it's really frustrating that we don't look at this as an opportunity for us to grow as people.
Yeah.
But
It can be a really scary conversation.
and once that
I just want to go back to what you had mentioned about the feedback that you got from a lot of women being like, this isn't my experience, and the things that we've heard, and just say like our identity groups are not homogenous. Like, we all don't have shared, like, the same experience, right? Like, we have some sort of shared experiences, and it doesn't mean that my experience is everybody else's experience. That as a woman of color, like, every single woman of color has had my own experience, and I think that it's really disheartening when you see people from your own communities being like, well, that's not my experience and she's lying. And it's like, why? Like, why not allow those folks to have those experiences? If that's not yours, then great. That's awesome. I applaud you. I'm happy for you. I'm so glad that you've had a supportive community. But that's not the case for all of us. And even when we have conversations in our own communities, like Bethany and Sage were talking about, it's not just like, oh, we're people of color, so we're perfect. No, like, there's so many things that we're figuring out. Like, when we talk, like, all these intersections of our identities, even, like, I work a lot in, like, women only spaces, and I'm constantly having conversations around transphobia because, like, some people are like, no, like, trans women shouldn't be in these spaces. And it's like, what? No. and it's like, it's baffling to me how people can advocate for spaces for themselves and not see the importance for other people to have those spaces. And it just kind of goes back to, I just want to remind people, like, we're not homogenous. We don't all have the same experiences. When you hear one of us speak, we don't speak for our entire community. Like, it is our experiences, and we're advocating for certain things to happen. And that doesn't mean that every single brown woman you're going to meet from now on is going to experience racism, sexism, and at these intersections in their climbing. Like, a lot of us do. And I know that there's one out there that's like, wow, like, I've had a great experience. My community has always been diverse. And I'm like, that sounds dreamy. Like, take me there.
well, not everybody's going to be able or willing to talk about that too. It's just like, you know, just respecting that there's different perspectives and experiences out there. And I think if you don't understand what that means, like, I think you can probably understand your experience as a single non-parent to, like, a married parent, or other people out there and listening to that podcast, like, those, how your own identity can change throughout your lifespan, and what those changes look like, and how those changes may influence, like, who you are around. Because, you know, maybe you don't want to be around a bunch of single guys that only want to talk about the crag if you've been up for, you know, 13 hours taking care of a newborn. Like, you know, like, you probably want to be around some other dads or some other moms that understand that, you know. Like, that's a really easy example that I think a lot of people all over can kind of understand, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes that we have a lot of those dividing lines in the community, and dividing lines is the wrong word, but just these little groups that congregate together, and we tend to congregate with people who have the same goals, the same priorities, things like that. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize, that goes across all lines, you know.
There's definitely natural groups that we go into all the time, but as soon as it incorporates these, like, social identities, that's when people are like, oh my god, like, what? And
I'll completely admit, and I think you'll be able to hear it in my voice in the beginning of this conversation, that I know it's a touchy subject and it's tough to talk about, and I'm nervous coming into this conversation. You know, I'm not nervous now. Now it feels like a really nice, interesting conversation.
It's mac and cheese and racism.
Mac and cheese, yeah.
This should be the title of this podcast.
Mac and cheese and racism. But I'm really glad that you said, you know, that you make mistakes. You all make mistakes. You're not You know, I
We're
think that's an
human
important,
beings.
yeah, it's an important thing to keep in mind, whether you're that person who like hashtag woke as fuck on every Instagram post that you put on there, you're still going to make mistakes,
Absolutely.
you know, periods. And don't take that as someone attacking you if they tell you that you've made a mistake. I think that's a big mistake that we all often make, is we automatically become defensive.
Yeah, I think even within our own community, like the Brown Girls Climb community, for instance, I mean, I'm a Black woman, and Montserrat is Latina, and so is Bethany. And I feel like because we have such diverse experiences and like different cultures, I feel like we are constantly learning from each other. We're learning how like racism shows up from like being Black versus being Latinx, and also how we can make mistakes within our community. And I think that's really beautiful to be humble enough to like listen and understand. I have a chalk bag that is very like Mexican colored chalk bag, and it feels very like appropriation-y. So having that conversation with Montserrat was really powerful. Just, I mean, having the conversation about what it looks like, and also respecting what it is, and understanding. I mean, there's just a beauty in being humble enough to have conversations about differences between folks.
And just like, even it's like, it just, those conversations just continue and trickle down. Like even within the Latinx community, like I struggle really hard with identifying as Latina, and sometimes I don't identify as Latina because my family is mixed race in the context of the country of Mexico. So like in the Latinx community, like you have folks who are Black, you have folks who are Indigenous, you have folks who are white, and you have folks who are mestizos, and a mixture of everything else. So even within the Latinx community, like the existence of like anti-Blackness and anti-Indigenism is like a thing. And it's hard like to be in like a Latinx community that is like so focused on like, oh, like these things that don't really uplift the beauty of Latin America, and also the hard history. Like it was actually Seisha who was giving me a little bit of the rundown of numbers of like how many African slaves were in South America, like in Brazil, and then between Mexico and the Caribbean. Like the U.S. was it? Can you remember? Was it Brazil? The United States?
Brazil. Yeah,
And
Brazil accepted a whole lot more Africans than the United States, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize. So there are a lot of Black Latinx folks, probably a lot more Black Latinx folks than there are like Black Americans today.
And it's just like it's a thing, is like, how do we have those conversations in our own communities? Like that's just something that I constantly struggling also with, like my family, like on my mom's side, like being Indigenous and like having those practices, and like people being like, yeah, like it's just like it's hard for me sometimes like to not be able to talk about my own history in the context of being Latina, where it's like Latino is being like mestizo being, and you know, even like the skin privileges that we have within the Latinx community, where a lot of people who are white presenting and white passing, because we have that history of like mixture in our communities and in our countries throughout Latin America, and it's hard to like continue to have these conversations, but we have them because they need to happen.
Sure. Seisha, I was going to ask you before you even brought it up, are there times at the Crag where, because you have darker skin than all of us here, are there times at the Crag where that's an obvious point of contention isn't the right word? It's just an obvious
It's
point
the first
that
thing
comes
people
up.
see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say, I think especially if I'm at a crag with a group of white people and people realize that I'm not scary, that I actually laugh a lot.
Just for the record, you're not scary at all.
She's got some of the best energy I've ever like experienced. So
Beautiful
thank you.
smile.
Yeah.
But I think once people realize that they can actually have a conversation with me, then oftentimes the first thing they ask me about is something that they assume all Black people should know, or is something that like that we identify with, or just whatever, and that lets me know that the very first thing they saw was my skin color, and they just needed to like feel comfortable enough to address it. This didn't happen at the Crag, thank God, but it just reminds me of once in Boulder. Yay! Once in Boulder, this guy, he came up to me, and the first thing he asked me was, "So, what are Black people like? Who are Black people voting for these days?"
Right.
And I didn't really know how to respond because I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would hope.
I don't know. I do like. I work in technology.
I was slightly shocked, but I basically said, I'm not sure. I haven't picked up my Black phone in a while.
Oh no.
Essentially trying to, without saying, whoa, dude, like Black people are not all the same and we're not all like voting for the exact same person, trying to, in a friendly way that didn't make me seem really scary, let him know, just try to call him in about the ignorance of assuming that we are all one identity and that we are all one mind.
Yeah.
And I do think that happens quite a bit. I feel like people, if there's music playing and there's country playing, then people play rap when they see me, which, I mean, I love rap, so sure, I mean, I will get down, but just the people instantly see me for my skin color, and they are either avoidant because they're not sure if I'm going to snap on them, angry Black woman stereotype, or if or when they do realize that I'm okay with having conversation, then the first thing they do is try to identify in some way, change their language, use Black slang, and it's
right.
It can be interesting.
Yeah, I've gone through those phases myself. Actually, I mean, I grew up in a hip hop community in Cincinnati, or really found myself in this hip hop community in Cincinnati, and I definitely early on tried to talk differently, dress differently, and eventually became my own person that didn't feel like I had to talk differently and act differently or dress differently, or have a rap voice, when I was on stage.
So do you have any pictures of this? I guess.
Oh yeah, there are photos.
All right, well,
there are photos.
There are words for that.
Yes, there are. And actually, one of my favorite rappers, Open Mike Eagle, who's a really, really intelligent man, has a great line that's made me think probably more than any other rap line in history about exactly what you were just talking about. He says, fuck you if you're a white man who thinks I speak for all Black folks. Fuck you if you're a white man who thinks I can't speak for Black folks. And that's made me think a lot about how I interact with other people, who I think might have some insight into this greater world that they identify with. It's not necessarily true, and in some ways it is true.
Yeah,
so
really powerful.
Yeah. Are you guys going climbing today?
No, we are actually, well, maybe later, but we are actually,
wait,
maybe, we're going to go to Sinks maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Come on, man.
But we have to go to the keynote speech. Anyways, we are actually hosting a Climbers of Color brunch in an hour.
Okay.
So we are just trying to rally the troops because we see so many Climbers of Color here this year.
Which is very different from last year.
Yeah, we just wanted to create some space for folks to get together and just hang out because, we don't see each other that often.
Yeah, it's really nice, and it's an excuse to eat huevos rancheros. And
oh my God, yeah. I brought some homemade tortillas and some salsa.
Yeah, it's really good.
You could just drop whatever's left off at my
We have some tamales too.
Great.
Yeah, we got some tamales from Bethany's mom from Texas.
Oh,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, we had that at Color the Crag, so I mean, I'm just saying, it was a nice.
Say we got the best food.
Yeah,
because these street tacos that they were selling out there.
Well, after your brunch, if you guys want to come to the gym and climb together, all of you, bring whoever. You're totally welcome to use it. Just
Thank you.
let me know, and I'll open it up for you.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up here, I know you guys have some things going on, but I really want to know a little more about something that you said in your email to me, Bethany. I found really interesting and really smart, and
Thank you.
not that
No,
I don't want that to sound like I was
messing with you.
surprised. That wasn't it at all. But mac and cheese.
See, we have a good time. We have a good time. People think this is scary. It's good.
But you said Brown Girls Climb currently isn't like reaching out to underserved communities. Instead, you're trying to put people in positions of leadership. And I just want to know a little more about that approach before we wrap up here.
Yeah. Well, one, it is addressing the narrative that that all brown and black people are, in need of a scholarship and a handout. Like, that is not true. And that need does exist, and there's definitely a lot of statistics out there showing there's a disproportionate issues on health, wealth, and everything else in those communities. And that's something that I'm personally very passionate about, and I think a lot of people in the climbing community of color are passionate about.
Absolutely.
But in terms of what we're doing right now is like, there is not a lot of people of color in leadership that have done a ton of big wall stuff that are getting elevated, like I said at the beginning. But there are people out there like Emily Taylor, like Chelsea Griffey, like Miho Ida, that have been here for a while. And so, the fact that their voices haven't been elevated, and the other people that I'm meeting through Brown Girls Climb and through Color the Crag, that there hasn't been enough spaces to show the rest of the climbing community, like, hey, you can learn from this guy too, or you can go support this woman in her business too. That's what we really want to address, because we have the community, we have we know a lot of the climbers out there. So trying to just either create events that we can have a space for them to tell their story, or create festivals or climbing opportunities for them to share their skills. To me, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, because I want to learn from those people. They understand not only what I need to work on as a climber, but they may have some additional skills on how to cope with the rest of the world and the rest of the day that's happening. I mean, if you turn on the news, you can see a variety of different events that are affecting our community, and it's really great to learn from people that look like you or understand you. And that's supported by research too. So so that's really what we're doing. I think the biggest way we can reach portions of our community that are at risk is like by building leaders. The fact that I can be in a position to be on your podcast and talk about this is awesome, and it allows me to go back home to my neighborhood and share these skills, share these resources, take people out climbing, not because I think climbing is like the panacea for everything, but because I'm able to just share another tool. I think to me that's like a big deal. Like, I'm going to share all the tools I can, and I hope that you can find a way that you can not get beat down by the world. So I think putting people in leadership positions is a big part of kind of mobilizing the entire community, no matter what.
Yeah. So I think that oftentimes when people think of people of color in places where they aren't normally highlighted, they think they're coming from a deficit mindset. And there's like this saviorism complex that is introduced. And I think that we see a lot of that in the climbing community. It's like, let's go to the inner city and grab these kids of color and throw them into this situation. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because I definitely think that a lot of communities of color have not experienced things like climbing. And so I think that's wonderful. And I think that there are a lot of organizations that are doing that. What I find so wonderful about Brown Girls Climb and what Bethany started is that there aren't a lot of people that are saying, let's create leaders of color to go back into those communities and to take those skills back into their communities. And so that's the beauty of Brown Girls Climb. Instead of like a lot of white folks deciding that they want to be mentors to kids of color.
Right.
we're instead increasing the leadership within our communities so that we can then introduce it. I mean, become fathers and mothers and introduce it to our kids, so that I also think that mindset, that deficit mindset, is one of the reasons why if I walk into a climbing gym, there's an assumption that I don't know anything about climbing.
Sure.
Because there's this stereotype about people of color that is continuing to be perpetuated by that deficit mindset that that we all perpetuate. I feel like it's not just the climbing community. It's a lot of organizations across across different communities that continue to perpetuate this idea that that we need to bring people in and see them from like a deficit perspective and teach them what we know. And I think that Brown Girls Climb is really changing that perception.
Yeah, and I just want to add that like those things aren't mutually exclusive, right? Like we have been putting, like, you know, we work with partner organizations to put on different things. So we do intro to climbing classes that are free. And we help women with getting access to gear, getting access to outdoor spaces. Last year, we put together a mini Brown Girls Climb Day in Clear Creek County and had 10 girls of color under the age of 18 come climb.
Wow.
And it was, for me, like, that's when I was like, this is what I want to do. It was a really powerful experience to have 10 girls of color be led by 3 women of color in the outdoors. They learned the basics of top roping. We talked a lot about communication and trust and building relationships with your belayers. And we did a lot of self-talk. There was a young girl, she was 7 years old, and her parents didn't really want to let her come. It was ex-coworker's niece, and she really wanted to come, and so my coworker convinced the parents, and they brought her. And you know, the girl was like, oh, like my parents told me that I shouldn't try that hard. Like I can do this, but like I shouldn't do anything more than this. And I was like, well, like why are you thinking those things, you know? And like I tied her in. It was a super easy, like super accessible, not easy, a super accessible climb for her. And you know, just kind of coached her through it. And she kept, like, she was crying and she was like, I can't. And then I asked the belayer to just hold her, and I kind of went up next to her, and I was like talking to her and being like, you know, where are these words coming from? Like, what is happening? And just like talking through, and like, you know, just hearing a lot of like where that self-talk was coming from, both like societal and like things that she's internalized and things that her parents were saying, and just kind of coached her. And she made it to the top of the climb, came back down, and she like didn't even unrope. She just like ran over to me and started crying and was like holding me. And she's like, I really liked that when I said I couldn't, you told me that I could. She's like, people don't tell me that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. Like how many like girls of color do I know, like being a girl of color being told like you can't do something?
You're gonna make me cry on my own
Sorry.
podcast. Damn it.
Yeah, it's just like you really begin to believe these things. And to have women who look like you teach you, it's just so powerful. And you know, we did that. And we're also collaborating with Women's Wilderness to have a program called Trailblazers. And we are opening intro to like the outdoors program for women of color. So Black, Indigenous, women of color can apply for this program. I'll be the lead instructor, and it's going to be the first time I'll be leading like an all women of color crew in the outdoors. And it just like to think that we have our own community members teaching us and collaborating with other organizations and using those resources and using those venues and those spaces. It's so powerful, and it really is a statement to what it looks like when community works together in the outdoors to create accessibility, to create spaces, and to be intentional about the work that we're doing.
Wow.
Sorry.
And Chris, this isn't anything new in the sense that, like, you know, climbing's dealing with this now, but STEM has dealt with this for a long time.
Right,
And, you know, there's a lot of templates out there and a lot of ways we can address this. And there's a lot of research on it, both on like what does make someone continue on going into a degree in engineering if they're a person of color. Like the risk of dropping out because of the pressures that they may have at home, or because of financial issues, or you know, systemic problems within that academic culture. There's so many issues that can pop up throughout that whole process of getting a degree. It's the same here too. Like, if we can encourage people along their climbing career, they're more likely to continue to do it. And I think we forget about that. We get so excited about being offended and, like, you know, having to recognize our own part in that process. But
I was really surprised by a lot of the statistics that you sent me, and I'll be linking to a lot of those in the show notes for everybody listening.
Yeah, I mean, it's really what drives me. Like, I'm first in my family to graduate, and especially with like a STEM degree, it's awesome. Maylise Edwards, shout out to her. She's a great lady in STEM and climbing. But if you're in research, if you're in academia, as a person of color, as a woman of color, you are faced with so many statistics. Like, you learn the statistics. I was introduced to them very early, you know, when I realized that my likelihood to go to college was really, really slim. You know, looking around your neighborhood or hearing, oh yeah, you're supposed to know how to do this. So you're going and seeing how many statistics are against you, and very little research on like what are the factors that are
causing those statistics.
Well, more than that, like
what are the barriers that can be alleviated?
Yeah, and like what are the factors that we hold within our cultures that actually make us resilient and actually like make us awesome? Like there's not a lot of positive research on communities of color.
Good point.
And so I'm carrying that with me every day at the Crag. Like, I want to do more and I want to see more from my community, because those statistics are bullshit, and I think we have the capacity. I mean, we've
even
climbed,
like us three hear our statement, like we are all college educated. We're all first generation college graduates for our families.
Yeah.
We all like have defined a lot of statistics and like specific to our communities across the board. Yeah.
And most likely figured it out on our own because our parents were not college graduates, and they had no clue how to tell us what to do, fill out applications, which majors to choose.
Didn't speak the language. My family's first generation immigrants. My mom doesn't speak fluent, full English. I was primary caregiver for my brother. Took care of my mom a lot. Like, we have all overcome.
Yeah.
Couldn't afford to pay for tuition or buy first car. I mean, just a lot of things that were barriers. And I appreciate what you said, Bethany. There aren't a lot of statistics, or there isn't a lot of information that talks about the things within us that have helped us to excel.
Yeah, I mean, this is about climbing, but it is about so much more.
Totally.
So it is a space that we're very excited and grateful to be in, because I think we've all been able to like see ourselves and claim ownership of our own bodies and our own beings in this space. So as many critiques we have, like, I am very proud to be part of the climbing community, because I feel probably in the first time in my life over the past few years as a 30-year-old woman that I feel strength within my own body, you know, and that has taken me a long time to come to terms with, you know, and I want other women to feel that same presence in their physical body, because it many people have that taken away from them.
That's one thing I've also talked a lot about, you know, being a survivor of like many things, but like you know, just different stuff that we talked about a lot, like sexual assault, and just like how much climbing can really help you heal, and how climbing it's just a tool to just, like Bethany was saying, like to feel in your body, to stand in your power, to just climb and be like, my body is capable of doing this, and if it's capable of doing this, it's capable of so much more, and it's capable of healing, and it's capable of getting right back up, like after you fall, both literally and figuratively. And I use that a lot with the women that I work with and the young girls that I work with, because I truly believe that climbing is a tool for healing. Like I really do, like it deep in my core, like that is why I'm so committed to the climbing community. And you know, I, like Bethany was talking about, like so many of these things are much bigger than climbing, and it's beautiful to just have the spaces to be able to connect them together. Working with a project with North Face, they are going to be releasing a video of my poetry in an animation mode, and it's just talking about my story and my family. And when they sent me this video, I started crying in my office, because it was just like, I could not believe that a climbing company, climbing community had fully embraced and captured everything that I was trying to say. And I think the image that really stood out to me is that they created an animation of my family, and the women in my family have never been together. My mom migrated here like a long time ago, like 29 years ago. And she has not seen her mom since I was 3 years old. And, you know, my family is really active in the outdoors in Mexico. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just like being able to tell my story. And the point I was getting at is that they created this animation of my grandma, my mom, my aunties, and my cousins and myself in this image. And, you know, it's just like, it's like a beautiful, powerful statement, because I don't actually know if that's ever going to happen. But it was just, it took me aback that a climbing company could really understand how powerful and how special that was for me. And, you know, they've been super supportive along with this project. So I'm really excited to share it with you once it's released. But it's just like coming back to, we can have these conversations simultaneously. Like these conversations are greater than climbing. They're also based in climbing, and they're not exclusive to each other. And to be able to have the spaces to talk and share those things, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and just like to add on to that, like we work with Access Fund, we work with American Alpine Club, we work with American Mountain Guides Association. Like this isn't like just a conversation we're having off on our own. This is a conversation that leaders within the community, leaders within the climbing community have stepped up and asked to be engaged with. So, you know, I hope that that people recognize that this is something that we are moving this way, and it is for the greater good. So
yeah, well, I hugely appreciate all three of you blessing me with sitting down and talking. There's so much powerful here that I think everyone can get out of this, and I'm really glad, Montserrat, that you just shared that story, because it makes me feel good about the direction things are going. I mean, good job, climbing community, but we've got a long way to go, and we've got a lot of work to do, and I'm glad that work is being done, and I'm glad that there are powerful humans like you three doing it. So hopefully I can do my tiny little part. So thanks a ton for sitting down with me. I'll have links where you can reach all three of these ladies in the show notes, and that you can find Brown Girls Climb, and if there are any meetups coming up in the near future, I'll have links to those too. So Bethany, will you tell us where they can find you on the Instagram and Facebook and all of those places? Well, first, thanks for sharing your space. I mean, you reach a lot of listeners, so we really appreciate just being invited to come sit on the grass with you, which is like the best place. On the grass or at the crag is like the best place to talk about uncomfortable things. Totally.
But you can follow us at Brown Girls Climb on Instagram. It's Brown Girls Climb on Facebook. We have, if you do identify as a woman of color, we do have groups on Facebook where we meet up, and so you can find people that you can climb with. And then browngirlsclimb.com is our website. We're working on it. That's a work in progress. But typically our events will be on our Instagram. The next event is in the Bay Area at REI in Berkeley. We are doing a summer series over July, August, and September, highlighting Chelsea Griffey on July 31st is the first one, Emily Taylor in August, and Miho Aida in September. And there's information on the Instagram for that. But it's a free event. You guys can invite your friends. We got swag. Yeah, should be really, really fun. They're going to kind of give some stories from their Yosemite days, but also talk about their work in advocacy and kind of share a little bit more about the nonprofits that they're involved in. So
we'll also be at Outdoor Retailer Show in Denver if you want to reach out to us there.
Yep.
Cool. Well, hopefully I'll see all three of you there again. And I would love to sit down with you three and anyone else. Again, I think there's a lot more to talk about and try to unpack. So
yeah, we should go climbing.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you. This was for sure one of the most fun conversations I've ever had. And I think that's pretty obvious if you're listening to it. And if you made it this far, you should go all the way to the end after the theme song, because there's a little more fun to be had. I do want to say a big thanks to all three of these women for sitting down and for being willing to let me stumble and struggle through this conversation, especially the mac and cheese part. Thanks for letting me do that. And I do want to talk about a few things here. I've been spending some time trying to get my thoughts together surrounding this. The day or so after I recorded this conversation, Bethany sent me screenshots of a Facebook thread that was going on and just said, because we just had this conversation, I would love for you to see this. And I'm really glad that she did, for several reasons. First off, the thread was appalling, disgusting. It was a person of color starting a mountaineering course for people of color to teach them beginner to intermediate mountaineering skills, which is amazing. And several white mountain guides chimed in and said, why aren't white people allowed? And we're going to use our power to try and block this event. And then it just devolved into this really, I don't even know what to call it, this display of absolute and undeniable racism, calling names, and regardless of the support that this mountaineering course was getting from a lot of the community, which was very heartening, it still is very disheartening that sort of racism exists out there in the open, and that there are people openly backing it up. And maybe the worst part of it all is that some of these people are trying to use their positions of influence to block these events from happening, as if it hurts them for these events to occur. And I'm not going to blow up anyone's Facebook spot by telling you exactly where to go, but just trust me that it happens. And I wouldn't have seen it. I would have been completely and utterly blind to it had it not been pointed out to me. And that got me thinking. I take pride in the idea that I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on in the climbing community. Let me rephrase that. I used to take pride in that. I don't think that's the case anymore. And I realized that I've completely curated my experience, both in my actual life and in my social media life. So all of my experiences are directly related to that curation, and they're all people that I like and people that I want to follow and people that I want to see. And I believe that I've kept relatively good people in that circle, and that completely skews the things that I see. And I don't consider myself someone who sees color first, but if I'm at the crag and a person of color walks up to the crag, that is the first thing I see. It is the first thing I notice, whether I like it or not, and I recognize that. And I think that's a shame. I think we should work to change that, and I look forward to a day when there is more diversity at the crag. Montserrat talked about white fragility, and while I agreed with that, I wasn't sure exactly how. And now that I've thought about it, it definitely resonates with me quite a bit, and largely because your response, my response to any of this is built on years of being a white male. And most of my listeners are white people, and our responses are built on years of that, of our whole lives. That's the only experience I can truly understand. So I can't possibly say that experience doesn't happen, or I can't have an answer for how to make your experience better. The best I can do is empathize, try and understand, have conversations, and try and be an ally. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Rest assured, there will be more nerdy training talk on here, but the fact is, we all want this to be a great community, a great place for all of us. So, let's work toward that. I think that's important, that it be a great place for everyone and everyone's experience, the best we can do. If you want more information, definitely check out all of the links that are right there in the show notes in your pocket supercomputers. You can go to the website and find the links there, powercompanyclimbing.com. I'll have links to the Color the Crag events, to the Robin DiAngelo book that Montserrat mentions, the statistics that Bethany and I talk about, and all of the links that she sent me on understanding this and how to be an ally. And I'll also have a link to the North Face film that Montserrat's poetry is featured in, and the image of her family. It's really powerful. You should definitely go see it. And you should follow them on the Instagrams and on the Facebooks. You can also find us there, Instagrams, Facebooks, Pinterest, at Power Company Climbing. You can look for us on the Twitter. I don't know if they're on the Twitter or not. They didn't say. But we are definitely not, because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
We don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, this time to build, this time to build, this time, this time to build, this time to build, this time to build, this time, power, power, this time to build, power, this time to build, power, this time to build, power. This time to build 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 power. This time to build. 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 This time.
Can I, before you go, can I have one of those two take a photo of us sitting here talking, just so I can put it on the social medias?
I think I got it. Like, if you want to look at this one, I think that Diego. Wait, Diego, did you not take a picture? What did I give you my phone for?
He has
Oh, you want
his
a
own.
picture?
Jesus.
Oh, do you?
You do?
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could I use one of those for my social media?
Of course.
That would be
Dope,
amazing.
dope.
I was like, I gave you my phone, homie.
I don't think he heard you.
What you think?
You
I
were
gave
trying
you
to
take selfies?
You were.
There's just a bunch of selfies of him on your phone.
Yeah.
Laying in the grass.
Yes.
We could take one more
Frolicking in the flowers.
here. I know. It's just